Happy Thursday. We're in November now, getting into nice chilly fall weather in the holidays. Noelle will be here shortly, and we will go over the wines from last week's D3 exam on that. Yesterday, you can check out in our video section, we went over the wines for D4 sparkling and the D5 fortified exam. About a 30-minute video, little chat as we go over, talk about some of the laterals and, many ways that you could get a lot of marks, even if you didn't nail the wine. And we're going to do the same approach here today. So, hello.
Good
Still
morning.
in New York?
Yep, still in New York. One more day. I think we leave at like 4 a.m. tomorrow. I didn't even want to think about it. Yeah. But we're going to go to Terroir tonight, the big Riesling bar. So I've never been. Very excited. That'll be
Excellent.
Fun. Yeah. So I'll let you know how that is. Maybe I'll do some blind tasting there. No, I don't want to. I just want to enjoy it.
There's a good chance you'll know the grape.
True. There you go. Yeah, so thanks for everybody who is joining or watching this on the replay. Amber and I dissected the sparkling and fortified yesterday. We're tackling the beast today with the same train of thought is, we're not going to play Monday morning quarterback and say that we would have nailed these or that these were easy wines. Some of them make me scratch my head a bit. So I don't know. I mean, this proves yet again the examiners can do whatever they want, and they will. So we'll break it down. Most of you that are watching are probably familiar with the layout of D3, but just in case you're not, there are 4 flights. And the first one is, and this is pretty set in stone. Wouldn't you say, Amber? Like, this is not something that the examiners change around. They change around a lot,
they did change the format a couple of years back with that, with a little bit of tweaks. But yeah, this is their basic format.
Right. So you start off, same variety. You have a common variety in the first flight. Second flight, common country. 3 wines, all from the same country. Then you take a break and you panic or you pat yourself on the back, whichever way you're feeling. And then come back and you've got your third flight, which is a common region. Mm-hmm. And then the 4th flight is a mixed bag, whatever they want to throw in there. So, and there's some common ones that rear their heads in the mixed bag, but we'll get to those at the end. So,
the big change was that third flight. That used to be a common theme of like quality. You could also have common like cool climate, things like that. But they made it a little bit simpler in that it's a region now.
Yeah. And I want us to talk about bankers maybe when we get to that regional flight, because there's some mixed feelings on that. So, so starting with the variety, that was flight 1. This year it was Pinot. And what the wines were was there was a Burgundy Nuit Saint George. There was a Pinot from Leda Valley, Chile. I can't say I've had a Chilean Pinot. Mm-hmm. And then Pinot from New Zealand, but not from Central Otago. It was from Marlborough. Mm-hmm. It's a similar overlap there, but so let's see. I did a little looking. I've never personally tasted any of these 3 wines that they had in the flight, but all the producer notes and then reviewers who I trust. One was Tim Atkin. He reviewed the Chilean Pinot and said, it is all about the fruit intensity here rather than oak. It is strawberry, coulis, and red cherry. And the Nuit Saint George Pinot was from older vines, 70 to 80 years old. So that's going to give that Pinot more concentration. The producer notes say that they normally produce robust, full-bodied wines with great structure and length. And then if you're familiar with New Zealand, you've got lots of fruit intensity because of that ozone layer there. So you're going to get really ripe, robust, plush fruit from a New Zealand Pinot. So as Amber and I were discussing and talking to other people, a lot of people actually went with Grenache for this flight. And I really think that makes sense with the ripe, plush fruits, with the fuller bodied. Maybe some diminished acidity even because, your mouth's playing tricks on you. Some other lateral.
Also first thing in the morning too. First flight in the morning.
True.
Especially if anybody didn't, have something like, a high acid wine or something to help calibrate in the beginning. That can really mess with your palate.
That's very true. And I also think if you're looking at the glasses, and these are more concentrated fruit from older vines or from your New Zealand, it maybe is not going to be the pale ruby that you would expect from a Pinot. So I can understand why people made leaps to, some people went with Gamay, there was Merlot, there was Tempranillo. But the fact that I'm seeing so many descriptors about these wines as being dark fruit, black cherry, it just, I'm like, okay, these sound like tricky Pinots. And I think when we think of a Pinot flight, we're like, well, that might have been that might have been a gimme. This definitely was not. This was not a gimme. And again, if you're a student who took this and you went with a different red variety, think of those overlaps. I mean, these were fuller bodied Pinots. And if you did have ripe red fruits and maybe medium or higher body, you're going to, again, get those points for those descriptors. And I think at the end, they had you, explain your reasoning for why you went with a certain variety, as long as that made sense. It does sound like none of these had very much oak. Even the Nuit Saint George, it says oak from, it was very vague, oak from 10 to 18 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and we had somebody just chime in. The first one from Burgundy was pale, but the other two were darker colored.
Yeah, it sounds like the last Pinot from New Zealand, or from Marlborough, that kind of played with a lot of people's heads because it was a darker one. And I think, especially in the U.S., there's not a lot of good New Zealand Pinot Noirs that make it there. Sometimes you'll get the cheaper ones like Kim Crawford and Oyster Bay that are going to be paler in color, but a lot of New Zealand Pinots are darker than you expect. You just nailed it, talking about the ozone, the more intense light intensity there. A nice, long, cool growing season, it can get those darker tannins. I mean, it's not going to be opaque where you can't read through it, but it is going to be darker than you expected.
Yeah, and your mind may not suggest Pinot. It sounds like the wines 1 and 3 were pretty darn good quality. The Chilean, I found it about $10 US. So I also heard it had that classic Chilean green notes. So that also might throw you off, like, well, what's going on here? Personally, Amber, I was surprised that they didn't have any US or Germany Pinots. I think that's also very tricky because, it's planted in those two countries way more than New Zealand and Chile. And yet again, they can pick whatever country they want.
Australia.
So, totally.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of option with Pinot. So Pinot is always a grape that is worth doing more extensive tasting, trying to get different varieties. And it's one of the perfect grapes to do. One of the things that Noelle and I talked about repeatedly in a lot of our videos leading up here is not blind. Do 3 different Pinots from 3 different areas. It's Pinot Noir, but now you have to break down in the glass of what is it telling you about the climate? What is it telling you about the nature of the fruit and the structure? Pinot Noir is an excellent grape to do this with.
I totally agree. And we do, I mean, I'm guilty. I think of, California and France with Pinot. Obviously, I know it's grown elsewhere, but when I'm drinking it, I go for, maybe Oregon as well. Someone else just mentioned no forest floor, mushroom, or other tertiary. And those, again, those are things you look for in Pinot. I empathize with you guys that maybe went a different direction. I think it makes okay sense that you did, so I wouldn't be like, oh my God, I didn't call Pinot on this, because this does seem like a tricky flight with the riper fruit, fuller bodied. I think your descriptors are going to be okay. And I think the examiners did this probably for a reason. They deliberately didn't pick kind of more elegant style Pinots. So yeah. Any other thoughts on this from you?
No, I think you nailed it with that. I mean, in my exam in May, I had the country fight was France, and there was a good quality Pinot Noir, great producer, village level, Chevrolet Jean Breton, old vines. I called it a simple, use the word simple in my note, basic Valpolicella. So Pinot is never a gimme.
It's not.
No.
Nothing is a gimme.
No.
Okay. Flight 2.
This was hard. I tip my hats off to the folks, that anybody that went to Portugal for the country with that, with these wines there. I think so. What they did with the Portugal flight, the first one was a Vino Verde, and I've heard from some people that when they first poured it, there was some of the little effervescence and petulance. Some people caught that, some people didn't, and it apparently very quickly went away. So it wasn't something to jump on, but that was one thing. And then 2 reds, and so altogether in the morning flights, you have 5 reds. So that definitely probably played with some people's palate fatigue.
Totally.
You had a red from the wine number 2 was a red from the Douro. Had a little bit of oak to it, more structure. Wine number 3 was from the Dow, so a little less oak, a little less tannins, but dark, ripe fruit for those. And so for a lot of people, I'm sure quite a few people were not expecting Portugal as a country. Going back to past wine exam, only once could I find previously a Portuguese wine was even featured, period. In the mixed bag. June 2007, there was a Vino Verde in the mixed bag. So Portugal's not one that often shows up, but this is a perfect example of a thing that Noelle and I talk about all the time is only the examiners know. Anybody that tries to tell you that they can crunch the numbers and guess what's going to come up, they're lying with that. The examiners can feature anything. Yep. Next exam could have Greece as the country. They haven't done it before. Yeah, or Portugal again. Yeah, you just never really know. And so that's why it's good to try to do as broad of tasting you can. But even if you don't get to the country, look at what you're getting with the wines. You have a first wine that is going to be on the lighter, crisper side, so a little bit some floral notes on it. Things that might suggest maybe a slightly cooler climate, but yet some ripe fruit. So a climate that has some moderating influence on it, like coastal wind. The other 2 reds, dark fruit, ripe tannins. That's going to suggest a warm climate. So some of the laterals that I heard were Spain and Argentina. And both of those make a lot of sense. That first wine, you could be thinking Albarino. Albarino across the river from Vino Verde. It looks like this particular one was mostly Lareo, but Albarino certainly is a component of Vino Verde. Makes a lot of sense. You're thinking Argentina, Torrontés. Torrontés makes a lot of sense. A lot of overlapping notes. Then you get to the reds. You can go Rioja, Mencia on it, and Argentina, Cab, with the one with the oak, Malbec. Mm-hmm. And in particular, when you think about if you did in your funnel with Spain, looking at the wines, these red blends, the Douro had Tinta Roriz, which is Tempranillo. Mm-hmm. The one from the Dow had, both of them were Touriga and Nacional dominant, but also had Jaén, Jaen. I apologize if I butchered Portuguese with that. That's Mencia. So many overlapping notes you would have had. And then one of the things I hope for students that took this exam was that you did do the funnel when you did your conclusion. Talk about the different things you were considering and why you were ruling some things out and leaning towards others, because you can get marks in that reasoning. Even if you completely came to the wrong conclusion, that funnel saves you so many marks.
Question for you. How many do you recommend people funnel? You don't want to say, I considered 8 different options.
Yeah, I would go 3.
Okay.
I think 3 is a very solid number. And it's a very reasonable number because a lot of times as you're thinking, there's probably 3 things that kind of overlap. With this flight here, even if you didn't go Portugal, Spain, Argentina.
I heard Australia, and
Australia. Yeah,
grapefruit. I think you do Riesling, maybe a Shiraz and Grenache. Yeah, I think that could make sense.
That would, yeah.
Yeah, tough one and unexpected, because I do think a lot of us get in our heads and like, oh well, D5 is where I'm going to be asked about Portugal. I had a theory question on Portugal on mine, and that was a surprise. And I passed on it because I was like, dang it, I didn't really study it that much because I thought it was going to be fortified. So, again, we empathize with you all who had the Portugal flight for your country. So then you have your break, and maybe you compared notes with other students, or maybe you didn't. You come back and you see some whites, and thankfully, the region flight was 3 whites. And I was thinking about that. I was like, gosh, where would my mind go? Because you can't help, I think, but sit down and go, where am I going? It turns out it was somebody went with Italy, and I want to talk about that because I think, having studied Italy a lot, I might, or no, maybe you mean for the country. But it turns out this regional flight was from Alsace, and the wines were a Riesling, a Pinot Gris, and a Gewürztraminer. So all 3 noble varieties of Alsace. And it sounds like they were all very classic representations of the wines. It's a very dry Riesling. The Pinot Gris had that classic kind of oily, viscous texture, hint of bitterness, which you can expect with this variety. Honeysuckle, pear, apple. And then the Gewürz, it sounds like maybe a little off dry, 13 grams per liter. So I don't know if anybody might have picked up on just a hint of sweetness. But Amber and I heard for laterals for this region is different areas in Germany. They make a lot of white wines. That makes sense. And even though I believe Mosel was your region on this list, doesn't mean that, you know, the examiners may not have picked Germany as a region again.
Yeah.
And then we also heard Loire for lateral, Northern Rhone. Nobody said that I've talked to Alto Adige, and I kind of am like, well, I wonder if I would have considered that because Gewürz, Riesling, Pinot Grigio, but that actually, I think that would be quite mean.
Well, also too, I had a Campania.
Yeah.
3 whites from Campania. Yeah. That would be an evil flight with that.
It totally
do Portugal and Campania? That would be just like way too evil. So thankfully they didn't go there, but that's another option, you know, when you think about with 3 whites, you know, 3 distinctive whites.
Yeah. So the Gewürz I want to talk about a little bit because sometimes there's this hope that you're going to have a banker in your flight. And honestly, what might be a banker for one person maybe isn't a banker for another person. I have a visceral reaction to Gewürztraminer. So for me, it is a banker 99% of the time. I can tell what it is because I'm just like, oh, get this out of my face. But sorry, Gewürz. It's so aromatic. It can often be mistaken for other varieties like Viognier, Torrontés. And if you kind of started going down that path, you might have tried to make the other wines fit in with that analogy. You know, if you think, boy, this is very floral, fuller bodied, I think this is Viognier, you might try to make it work for the Northern Rhone. And that's totally understandable. And again, with the overlap, if you described these well and you got their structure, you can still gobble up enough points to hopefully get over this hurdle. But what are your thoughts, Amber, on like trying to find the banker and latch onto that?
Yeah.
And then, because I understand why people do it. I've been guilty of trying to do it too. But I think you always have to second guess yourself and question, okay, if I think this is Torrontés or if I think this is Viognier, what do these other 2 have to be? Yeah. And really analyze that. What's your 2 cents?
Beware of the shoehorn. I mean, you latch on to a grape as the banker. I mean, that was my failing in my country flight. You know, the one where my basic Valpolicella, the Pinot, it was France. I went Italy. I actually considered that Valpolicella and the herbalness there with as part, not quite a banker. I consider herbalness actually as my banker, that trait of herbalness, because I got that in all 3 wines. So I thought, you know, what was the cab had to be a, you know, Chianti, and, you know, I couldn't make that last one fit quite well. So I shoehorned it into being a Montepulciano. When you find yourself shoehorning one wine, especially if you find yourself shoehorning 2 of the wines just to fit what you think is the banker, take a deep breath, reset.
Yeah.
And really just go in and look and see what the glass and wine are telling you. You kind of want at least confirmation from 2 of the wines in the flight.
I agree.
You want 2 things to kind of be your banker before you try to even shoehorn the 3rd one. And even then, don't really shoehorn. Just let the notes flow as they go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think seeing 3 whites made people probably prematurely guess. Because you know, they might have just like, ooh, this is da-da-da, without really taking a step back and thinking, what is this? So Yeah, I think an Alsace flight is interesting, and I think that there hadn't been one before. Is that right?
I don't believe so. Yeah,
Okay.
Alsace often pops up like mixed bag.
Okay, yeah.
But I will say these are really, or also part like of a general France flight with
Yeah.
that. Oh, actually, no, Alsace does pop up. There's been a couple flights, 2015 and 2007. There's actually quite a bit of overlap between the June 2007 wines and the wines for this one. I thought was kind of interesting. But these are also producers that examiners like that are very, very solid examples of the region. So Ugel is a really good one. And then for the Pinot Gris, Schlumberger, which is probably one of the experts when you think of Pinot Gris, especially one that you can get at good quantities. If you go back, I did a mystery grape on not the exact same one, but on Schlumberger Pinot Gris on the July 19th. You can go back in our Elevage account and you'll see the photo there. And I talk about in the recap there, this was before I was doing the video recaps of the blind tasting clues, that are distinctive about Alsace. They've got some weight to it. There's some ripeness of the fruit because of the climate. And so when you're doing this for this flight, I hope that you thought about, again, the nature of the fruit, how it came out. Yes, you're getting weight, you're getting texture, and perhaps even phenolic bitterness. Those are good things to note and think about what that tells you.
Yeah. Does it lead you to Germany, or does it maybe lead you to Alsace? And I need to give you a shout out because you did a number of mystery grapes that turned up on the exam. That it went in the mixed bag, which you're just going to talk about. I was like, okay, yeah, she did that one too. So, yeah, the mixed bag or
not on purpose, just
No, I wish you had a crystal ball, but I know you don't. Yeah, I don't want to say it was dumb luck either because I know you had.
No, it was dumb luck.
Well, I don't want to say that. Okay, but Amber's going to cover the mixed bag, and again, this is like they can do whatever the heck they want in this. This is a crapshoot.
Yeah, one of the big things though about the mixed bag, when I was studying for my exam, I was doing it at the WSET school in London. Russell Dent is the program manager there, really great guy. He helping us prep for it. One of the things he told us is, looking back at past exams, the flight that always seems to have the highest pass rate is the mixed bag. And that's the flight that intimidates most people. But Russell's theory, which I think is absolutely spot on, is people stop playing head games with that flight. You're not trying to shoehorn anything in. You're taking the wine as it's come, and you're writing down the notes as you perceive them. And then you're trying to consolidate the evidence to guess what that one wine is. Then you move on to the next wine. So you're free from that bias influencing those other notes. And so people rack up the most marks.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. Interesting.
Yeah. And so my advice, and I know how hard it is firsthand being an exam, you want to kind of try to put the pieces together and think, what logic the examiners are doing. Try to treat every flight like a mixed bag. I mean, if I could grant a wish for everybody, that would be the wish, is that we could somehow go in and treat all 4 flights as a mixed bag flight, because I think that would just make it so much easier for a lot of people.
I agree. And then go back and look at your notes. What did I write? And then figure out, what is this telling me? What do these all have in common? Instead of, no, I think that's super sage advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 3 wines in the mixed bag, one was a South African Cabernet Sauvignon from Stellenbosch. Looks like a kind of a mid-quality one on that. I heard quite a few folks who had different guesses. Apparently it had some green notes to it, some perazines. Looking at reviews, leafy pops up quite a bit, black currant leaves on there, and oak. So I heard people go Carmenere. Makes perfect sense. You're going to get a lot of overlapping notes. I heard some people even consider Cab Franc.
Sure.
One person that told me that they had Cab Franc in their funnel, but noted the high alcohol of this wine and the bigger tannins steered them away from like a Loire Cab Franc. So I think they probably did a really, really good funnel, it sounds like. And then also some people did go Cab, but thought chili because of that greenness on it. So a lot of things that look like that were in play there. The second wine was a Lodi Old Vine Zin from California. This is one that was apparently like kind of screaming New World in that, it had some ripe, dark fruit. Sounds like some people, though, picked up on the nature of Zinfandel with a little bit of uneven ripeness, though. So you had some ripe fruit, dark fruit, but then you also had some red fruit, and maybe even a little bit of green notes. This is a style of Zin that examiners tend to like to put. When you're in the U.S., you're kind of spoiled with all the great different examples of Zin, some of the really spicy ones and floral ones. The examiners kind of like this more jammier style that shows that uneven ripeness on it. So that is a good style to practice. Don't spring for the good $30 plus Zins. Kind of think more in that $10 to $20 range of those really good Zins. But this is one I heard, Aussie Shiraz popped up, ripe, dark fruit.
Totally.
Malbec. I heard a few people, though, thought it was maybe a little carbonic in nature. And so they were even thinking like Cote d'Aron or like a Joven Tempranillo or La Mancha Tempranillo from Spain. And so I think they probably did, get good funnel going on with their different answers. But I think they probably got a lot of good marks for that.
And I'm noticing
it
was 13.5% alcohol, which is a little bit low for Zinfandel. I think what a lot of us would expect. And so maybe if you weren't getting that heat in the back of your throat, you may have, called a lateral there. And that's
now nobody knows what's on the marketing key, but one of the things, like in the US, if it's under 14%, you have a 1.5% leeway. So that 13.5 could actually be 15% alcohol.
True.
And so potentially on the examiners, they could have had on acceptable to give marks of scales, medium to high with that. Because there's multiple people tasting these wines. I've heard from my APP and different providers that at each testing site, they have people that go through and also do a marking key just to make sure the samples that are poured to that testing site match the examiners, and they consolidate all those different marking keys to have the final key that they give to grade on it. So on things, there might be ranges. Again, nobody, only the markers know ultimately what's on their key on it. So I wouldn't sweat too much if you didn't feel like you nailed the alcohol. If you looked at here and saw, 13.5, but I called it high, you might still get the point on that. The last wine was this was another mystery grape one. And there's a video on it that you can see. It was a Tokai. The one that was in the exam was actually a 6 Putinose, but I did a little video in a mystery grape for a 5 Putinose Tokai, and talked about in particular how to distinguish from the most common lateral, which I heard a lot of people went with, was Sauterne on it.
Sure.
Pretty much anything with botrytis, could be, somebody could have gone to Alsace, go with that, SGM, could have gone to Germany with it for some of the, an Auslacen with a bit of botrytis, or go fully, botrytis. Béarnaise, BA or a TBA would be a bit unusual, kind of expensive, but I would love a TBA, an exam. But if you caught on that, the botrytis notes, and wrote your tasting note towards that, you got a lot of marks. I mean, ultimately, what kind of would have steered some people towards Tokai away from Sauternes is nailing that alcohol call. This one, 9.5, low alcohol. Sauternes is almost always high alcohol, and at 14%, because riper fruit. And also, they don't necessarily use 100% botrytis in Sauternes. They do in Tokai. It has to be those individual little, really butcher-sized berries to do. And then the other big thing, and I encourage folks to go back to look at the video, but in particular, look at the comments for the Tokai video, because I didn't emphasize this in the video enough, but Yvonne, who is a regular on a mystery grape, brilliant woman, MW student, she noted a big thing about the use of oak and how different that is. In Sauterne, they like their oak. You will pick up vanilla. You'll pick up oak spice. You won't pick that up in Tokai. And so what it sounds like is a lot of people did follow Yvonne's advice and noted that there wasn't a lot of oak in their funnel when going between Tokai and Sauternes, and that helped them ultimately get to Tokai.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Yeah. Shout out.
Yeah. I think that's awesome, because you did a number of these in your mystery grape. So if you all are not tuning into that or watching when Amber posts her clues, make sure you do, because it's not just about guessing the grape. Like she gives you a lot of reasonings why. And if you just have those in the back of your head, maybe they'll come to the forefront when you're taking your exams. So yeah.
I got a mystery grape coming today. So generally what I do for those that are new to the game, Tuesday's game, I go geeky. I go with a very, very obscure variety, like I did this past Tuesday, went Elbling from Germany, or I go with a grape from a region that you might not think that's associated with that region, like I did a Cab Franc from Missouri before. But on Thursdays, I try to go classic grape that might show up in an exam like this, and a classic benchmark region, and how the clues of the region push you towards the grape. So if you're studying for blind tasting exams, Tuesday's kind of a fun game, just the geekiness. But the Thursday games, which I do recaps on the following Tuesday, those are the ones really for the students.
Yeah, and a lot of those do show up on these exams time and time again. And like you said earlier, watch your shoehorning. I do think that it's hard we don't want to guess what the examiners are going to do, but we also want to look at what we've got and kind of, what's the most obvious answer? What's the simplest answer? My husband and I were talking about Occam's razor last night. And, don't try to make it more complicated and like, well, this could be Müller-Thurgau and this could be, something else obscure. And take a step back and look at, okay, what the examiners could totally put that on. But, for Alsace, maybe that's, a little bit more of an obvious call than some obscure. Yeah, I think I would have rolled out Alto Adige just because I would think, gosh, that would just be very obscure for the examiners to do. Not that they couldn't do it, but Alsace is the more likely answer. So I think just question yourself. And, we've all done this. We've all found one clue, whether it be an aroma or the texture of how it feels in your mouth or tannins or something. And we latch onto that and we're like, this is definitely, I did that with a Brunello and I was like, I am getting smoke and tar. This is Pinotage. And then I made that wine fit into Pinotage and it made no sense. So question yourself. I know, you're pressed for time and you're stressed out, but again, I think all those laterals we covered, there's enough overlap with those points. And hopefully if you went with one of the other areas, countries, regions that we talked about, I do think that you're going to gather up enough points. And again, you've got your quality assessment and bottle aging. So it's, again, not all about getting that flight absolutely correct. That's going to make or break your pass. So I hope that you have let go of that a little bit. It's hard. Yeah. So next exams are January.
Yep.
Right? For diploma.
Yep.
So Amber and I are planning to focus more on what those are going to be: the D2 marketing, D4 yet again, sparkling, and D5 fortified. And then for those of you who are just starting to study D3, and I've seen some of you on Instagram, you're getting your samples or you're cracking open that gigantic book, we're here for you. And we'll be with you until your May exam and beyond.
And we're also, we do talk a lot about diploma because, we have a lot of friends that have been taking the diploma, and that's something that's fresh in our brain. But any type of wine exam that you're studying for with that, Wine Scholar Guild, this Certified Specialist of Wine, we will do our best to help. If you just reach out, if there's a subject that's just driving you nuts on that, we're here for you.
Level 3 WSET, level 2. Yeah. I mean, we would love to, no matter what. So hopefully this helps some of you guys. And if you did take the exam, I hope you're doing okay. And I hope you can just kind of relax and it's over with, and we'll talk in 12 weeks.
Yeah. And give us your thoughts. If you took the exam, give us your thoughts in the comments. We definitely would love to hear your first person insight of kind of how you felt about the different flights. We had several people here on this live kind of chime in with their notes, but when we post this video, share it.
Please. You were on the front lines. Let us know. So, okay. All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.